Thank you for joining the Cancer Vac CEO Chats with me today. So I'm joined today here by my friend, Dr. David Beers. And David, with your permission, I'll just try to give just a little teeny snippet of your background. And if I miss something or botch it, please correct me. But
okay, I will. Thank you.
Yeah. So Dr. Beers graduated with a BS in human biology from BYU, and then received a PhD in cell and structural biology from the University of Texas Health Science Center. David began his career at the Cancer Therapy Research Center and then became the co-director of, and this is where I might mess it up a little bit, Dave, and I'll need some correction, but of genetically modified mice at the University or at Arizona Cancer Center. Hope I got that right.
Yeah, no, that's about right. Yeah, that's great.
After that, you became an assistant professor in the Department of Molecular and Cellular Biology at the University of Arizona. And then your career took a bit of a shift, and you co-founded and served as chief scientific officer of a biotech company called Montogen Pharmaceuticals in the cancer space. After selling Montogen, Dave became VP and chief scientist for Supergen, a publicly traded company. Currently, Dave is the co-director of the Center of Investigational Therapeutics and is an associate professor at the Huntsman Cancer Institute and Department of Oncological Services. As best I can tell, Dave, and this is where I may need a little bit of help, but it looks like you've trained over 20 postdoctoral fellows, published over 45 manuscript papers, publications, have over 25 patents that you're listed on, and authored 3 book chapters. Gosh, I need to come up for air and take a breath here. That's a hefty resume. Have I missed anything? Tell me a little bit more about your background, your career, and.
Yeah, you bet. No, I can tell you a few other things. So I kind of had an interesting career where I've bounced back and forth between academia and industry, and that's been kind of unusual. Usually, when you make the break and move into out of academia, it's hard to go back, and part of that is the things that are valuable and are valued by academic publications, grants, those types of things. It's hard to maintain that as an industry scientist, and I've done an okay job doing that, and been able to still be able to publish and to be involved in basic science research and translational research at the same time running companies. Right now, I now have started my 6th biotech company. So I've
oh my goodness,
I started quite a few in the process, and it's been a lot of fun. It's one of those things that there's nothing like taking a scientific discovery and turning that into something that can actually really help people. And that's what gets me up every morning is the idea that something that I'm working on, a discovery that I can make, can actually really help a real person. And it's if I got to get up and go to work every day, that's not a bad thing to be doing, right? So
no, it's not at all.
That's why I love what I do.
The gold at the end of the rainbow in this industry is potentially being able to really help people, and that's a pretty cool reason to get out of bed. I agree.
Yeah.
I've been in the biotech industry for over a decade now, and the funny thing is unlike you, I don't have a science background, at least not the same type of science that you studied in college. I was a political science major and before going to business school, but the funny thing is I recall a time when I was surrounded by PhD chemists and biologists and cell biologists, and I kept asking a few questions, and they looked at me and they're like, "Geez, we thought you knew this better." And I said, "Guys, I'm a scientist just like you. I'm just a political scientist."
That's right.
But so, Dave, what was it then that kind of was that kind of the motivating reason that your career seemed to have started more on the academic side, and then you gravitated back to the industry side. What was sort of that? What allowed for that move, or what was kind of the impetus there?
Yeah. So, my whole life, it's kind of funny looking back. When I was a kid, I used to tell people that I wanted to be a scientist and cure cancer. And the reason why is the year I was born, my father's father, my grandfather, was diagnosed and died of colon cancer. He died very quickly. I don't have any memory of him. I never got to know him. I have one picture of him holding me as a small newborn baby, and that's it. That's the only connection I have to my grandfather.
Wow.
And then later on in my life, my mom was diagnosed with colon cancer and died of colon cancer as well. And so, for me, I've always, from the very beginning of my schooling, I wanted to be a cancer researcher. It's really what I'd focused on. And I got really lucky when I was a graduate student. I participated in a discovery that people got excited about and actually led to cancer therapeutics. And so that was fun to discover something that actually got translated into a real drug. But I did a postdoctoral fellowship with a guy named Dan Von Hoff, and that really changed my whole trajectory of my career and my life. Instead of focusing just on working in the lab and being a scientist, what Dan opened my eyes to is the translational of taking that discovery and turning it into a real therapeutic. And so that's kind of what happened. And working with Dan, I met him in Texas and then moved to the University of Arizona, where he was the cancer center director there. And he's the one that really kind of taught me everything about drug discovery and drug development, and then encouraged me as we made discoveries that we thought could translate into drugs to move those forward. He told me one time, he said, nobody will believe in your stuff as much as you. And so if somebody's going to move it forward, it might as well be you, right? So that was kind of the motivation to say, maybe I better leave the comfort and safety of an academic lab and move into kind of the entrepreneurial world. And I had no idea what I was doing. Unlike you, I had never taken a business class. I spent my whole undergraduate and graduate school career just sitting in labs and working in labs. So I didn't really know what that all entailed, but I got my business degree in the School of Hard Knocks for sure.
Well, I got my science degree in the School of Hard Knocks, so I can empathize somewhat. It's funny because I finally hit the point when I had this. I was working for a venture capital company, and we completely broke our thesis because we were more of a growth equity company, investing in companies with, EBITDA of 1 to 3 million or whatever. But we found this crazy little technology out of the University of Utah, and it was an idea, and we invested in it, and the company needed a CEO. I stepped in, and that's sort of the beginning of my biotech career. But I've absolutely fallen in love with the biotech sector, and I hope this is where I stay the rest of my career. Like, instead of spending all of my time making a widget to sell, we can make drugs that save lives, change lives, and that's pretty cool. So it seems like, and maybe I'm wrong here, but it seems like in your early studies you were more focused on the human biology, cell biology side. But I feel like this is not on your resume, but it feels like you've almost gravitated a little bit more towards chemistry, and maybe there's sort of a bridge between those two gaps. And I know that the really good chemists really have to understand cell biology in order to for that translation to work from the lab into the industry. But how did that transition for you happen?
My dad's a chemist. My dad has a PhD in chemistry, so I kind of learned a lot about chemistry from my father. In fact, my father invented the inkjet pen for Hewlett Packard, that little cartridge that you put into your.
Of course, we've all used that.
Yeah. So my dad worked at HP for many so and when I was a teenager, I worked. I would go to his lab and make ink for the inkjet printer. So I got exposed to chemistry early. When I was an undergraduate, I was a chemistry major until I was a senior, and changed my major because I just thought, what, I can do more, and I'm more interested, just inclined towards biology, and so kind of shifted there. But then found myself kind of going back to chemistry as I moved into industry, and so I've got a nice, I'm not I don't have a PhD in chemistry, but I feel like I can hold my own with a lot of chemists, and I've done a lot of work in structure-based drug design. So that's I have a background in cell and structural biology, and the structure biology side, knowing how proteins fold up and how natural ligands interact with proteins. I've kind of learned over the years how we can design drugs to kind of mimic those natural regulators of proteins. And that's really what most of the drugs that I've been involved with, we've really discovered using structure-based drug design. So I've kind of an amateur chemist. I can put on my chemistry hat every now and then. So yeah.
Well, it's interesting though, from my experience, chemistry, although insanely important, it only gets you so far. If you don't understand the cells and how they work and why they live and what's going to kill them, the chemistry is not going to do a lot of good, right? And so I think that having that both disciplines is super important.
Super important.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I know you mentioned you just started your 6th biotech company. I can't wait to hear more about that. I know of 2, but and the 2 I know of were both in the field of cancer, and that's where I sit today with CancerVax. Is just so you know, we're developing a Ewing sarcoma drug, a bone and soft tissue disease that mainly affects children of extremely high mortality rate, and then we're working on a vaccine. We call it a universal cancer vaccine, where we're trying to identify, common markers that cancerous tumors have that are different from healthy cells. So we can, mark those unique biomarkers and then target those tumors with an antigen. But what I'm particularly interested in the field of oncology, and I know you working with, having started several cancer companies, we're working with the Huntsman Cancer Institute, and now that I hear your story with your background of your mother and your grandfather, and I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Was that really kind of a driving factor to stay in this field?
Yeah, no, and yeah, absolutely. It's something that I've gravitated to, really at the very beginning with my career and really in my training, studying cancer and different ways that mutations affect cancer rates and different incidents and drivers of cancer. Really did a lot on the genetic drivers of cancer early on. Did a lot of mouse modeling. As you mentioned, I became an expert in genetically modifying mice. I haven't done that for a while, but I could go in and manipulate, either take genes away or put genes back, to overexpress them to model cancer. But yeah, it's been the vast majority of my career focused on cancer. But cancer's really changed. When I first started, and that's a long time ago now. I look back I've been at this for a while, so more than 25 years of doing research. We were just focused on killing cells. I mean, that's what we worked on, was how do we differentiate between cancer cells and killing those cancer cells and killing and not killing the normal cells. And we've really moved into areas now where everything is all about trying to get the body to heal itself and to restore normal regulation, and not just try to kill cancer cells. So that's a lot more interesting, but a lot of challenge there as well, because cancer cells figure out ways of turning on and off so many different pathways to this idea that we can just flip some switch and take care of all the problems. It's challenging and it's difficult, but we do know, like you mentioned with your company, that our own immune system is our best medicine that we have, and really getting out of the way of our immune system is kind of what we're all focused on in trying to develop new therapies for cancer. And that's the vast majority of my work today, is really focused on how does the immune system get messed up, and how can we restore immune function so that it can take care of the problem, as opposed to us trying to poison these cancer cells to death.
Yeah, that's immunotherapy, right? I mean, that's really such an exciting field. I kind of sometimes say we're teaching the immune system, but we're really not teaching it. We're maybe reminding it, right? Waking
there
it
you
up.
go.
Yeah. So I'm guessing that your newest venture is in the immunotherapy sector, right?
Correct.
Yeah. What's that one about? I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah. So we actually started a company called Halia Therapeutics, and Halia is actually we initially started this company to target neuroinflammation in the brain.
Hmm.
And what we've discovered is that we have a new mechanism that we can turn off a specific type of chronic inflammatory signaling. And of course, where we see the greatest effect is in cancer. So it kind of pulled us right
Wow.
back into cancer. So we think we have a way to actually identify people that are high risk for developing cancer, and we may have a way to actually prevent cancer by blocking chronic inflammatory signaling pathways early on when the disease is still localized and before it gets metastatic. So that's really what we're focused on, is trying to target the earliest stage of cancer and the immune modulatory microenvironment of that cancer by changing it, targeting a specific pathway. So we just entered the clinic. We treated our
Wow.
first about 40 people so far, and so far things look pretty promising. So we're excited about the
Congratulations.
data that we're seeing, and we could have something that could be pretty revolutionary way to treat cancer patients.
That's phenomenal. Yeah, yeah. Maybe I can buy you lunch sometime because I'd love to hear more about that. That really sounds
Absolutely, love to
fascinating.
show you. Yeah, absolutely. It's really it's been a fun journey. You know, I for the first time in my career, I was like, oh, I want to try something that's not specifically cancer, and
Yeah.
where we ended up was right back at cancer. So
You know,
it just seems
it's interesting. The brain is so complex, right? And the neurological pathways. And I have a friend, Ryan Watts, who started Denali Therapeutics, and that's all
yep,
that they've really focused on are these neurological issues. I have an aunt who suffers from MS, and but it's something as simple as a pathway and inflammation. I mean, that's fascinating to me that can lead to cancer. So
yeah.
yeah, good on you. That's great.
Thank you.
I also want to hear a little bit about the I call it sort of a biotech incubator program.
Yeah,
And I know that maybe that's not the official name of it, but that's at least how I view it. But tell me, because that's the exciting. That's an exciting opportunity, I think, especially for young scientists, you know, who come up with good ideas but don't really know what to do more beyond that. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you guys are doing
sure.
here.
Yeah, so we a couple years ago when I was leaving Sumitomo, you know, I sat down with Mary Beckerly at the Huntsman Cancer Institute, Randy Peterson, who's the dean of the College of Pharmacy, and then Keith Marmar, who's the chief
Yeah,
innovation officer of the University of Utah. And you
know
know,
them all.
yeah, you know all of them. Great. So one of the challenges that we always face in the academic environment is, you know, we make discoveries and we can take them so far, and then they kind of just stop, and either they get licensed out and they're too early, and the company that licenses it really struggles to be able to fund that and to bring to bear the resources to move it forward. You know, and so the vast majority of things that are discovered, and this isn't just the University of Utah, it's every university
Yeah,
has
it
the
is.
same problem. So
Yeah.
what we hatched the idea of creating what we call the Therapeutics Accelerator at the University of Utah. And so what we've done is we've gone out and found people like myself and the team that I've built that have actually been involved in developing therapeutics outside the university. And so we brought a mentality and a skill set that's a little different than what you learn when you're a graduate student or a postdoc,
Yeah.
or even a professor working at the university. So we brought this group, and then we were able to put together some funding through the generous donations from the Huntsman Cancer Institute and the University Foundation and the College of Pharmacy to put together this ability to identify the best therapeutic projects at the university, and then to help fund moving them forward faster and farther than they normally would go. And so what we do is we go in and we work side by side with the investigators, and we say, you know, this is your project, it's your research, it's your discovery, but if you really want to take this forward as a therapeutic, we'll work right beside you, and we'll do the things that we would normally do inside of a company in terms of you know, building a target product profile and making something that looks like a real drug. And at the same time, you can study the science and pursue all the things that you're interested in. At the end of the day, all that data we generate is still the investigators, but we try to move that technology farther and faster than it normally goes. And in fact, we have the mandate that we could even do the toxicology and manufacturing work that could support an investigational new drug application. So we
huge.
have 17 active projects right now at the university where we're spending money moving therapeutic projects forward, and it's pretty exciting. It's it's been a lot of fun to be able to help and show these investigators this is how we would approach this, and how it's a little bit different, but still still involves a lot of the same steps and science that they're that they've spent all their time and effort on. But we what we do that's a little different is we have kind of a profile that we're trying to match and say, in order to be a good drug, you have to look like this. And so we're trying to take what they start with and make it look like something that a potential partner or acquirer would look at and say, yeah, that looks like a real drug.
Yeah, that is so needed and so cool. I love that. I'll tell you, I like the word accelerator on there too. I'll tell you a quick funny story. We licensed a drug out of the University of Utah as well many years ago, and I'm coming from the business world into both, not just the biotech world, but really the academic world, because all of our research was done at the U, in kind of between the biology and the chemistry departments there. And I remember feeling frustrated at just how slow academia moved. It was just, for me, I'm used to going warp speed, and then I just kind of, the brakes were forced upon me. But I remember we had advanced the drug enough, and we were meeting with the FDA. We flew to into the DC area, and we were at the FDA's headquarters, and we're having a tour of the FDA. And they said, this one guy who was giving us a tour turned to me and he said, we're slow here, but we're way faster, or we're not as fast as academia. And when I heard we're not as fast as academia, I just about had a panic attack. So anything you can do to help these cool ideas, I think is just needed. So well done.
Well, thank you. It's been a lot of fun. We love it.
Yeah, and it's so needed. The last question before we close is, I would ask, what advice would you give to a young biotech company who's trying to start up? I think you're starting this accelerator is helping the investigators and the scientists, the academicians, but on the biotech side, do you have any good advice for young biotech companies?
Yeah, I think that, the things I've learned over the years, and as I mentioned, I kind of feel like I learned business on the School of Hard Knocks side of things, but what I believe is good science makes good medicines, and good medicines are good business. So for me, I think you just can't lose sight of the science that you're working on. It's the beating heart of any biotech company, and that's really, you need to follow what the science is telling you, and it's hard sometimes because every company that I've been involved with has had to pivot, and those pivots really come most of the time because you get new data that says this isn't doing exactly what you think it's doing. It's doing something a little different. Sometimes that little different thing is much more interesting and much more exciting, and being able to commit yourself that you're not going to just pound a round peg in a square hole, that you're going to follow the science. And when you follow the science, that's when you make good medicines, and good medicines are good business. Because, if I can make something that changes the outcome of the disease for the patient, a guy like you can figure out how to make money on it. So I think that for me, I think that making sure that you're well connected to the science, and then you make good decisions based off of real data. And, I tell everybody there's so much uncertainty in what we do. But when you have data in front of you and you make a decision based off that data, you're never wrong. I mean, you could turn out that it didn't work out the way that you'd planned, but you weren't wrong making that decision based off of that data. So that's kind of what, one of the things that I've learned, and I try to practice every day, is every major decision that we make needs to be data driven, and we need to be connected to that science.
I think that's the tagline of the whole interview is sound science makes sound medicine makes sound business. And that's well put. Yeah. Well, Dr. Beers, thank you. Thanks for your time today. This was a lot of fun.